Welcome back, everyone. If you joined us last night, you may remember part of our conversation with a panel of attorneys that we had, and we spoke about one case in particular. That was the Akai Gurley case, that where the officer now charged with manslaughter for shooting Gurley in a Brooklyn stairwell, and that officer on trial as we speak. Both sides agree that Officer Liang was on a vertical patrol when he fired his gun in an unlit stairwell in 2014, killing Gurley, who was just opening a door in a stairwell of a building he lived in. Well, that's where the agreement, though, ends as to what happened. Prosecution says he was reckless. Defense says it was an unfortunate accident. And a short time ago, our own Dominic spoke with the president of the PBA, Pat Lynch, about the Gurley case and a lot more.
Thank you for joining us.
It's always a pleasure, Dominic.
Let me begin this way. Not far from here in Brooklyn, the prosecution has charged rookie cop Liang broke, quote, rule after rule while patrolling the dimly lit stairwell in the pink houses with his gun out and apparently his finger on the trigger. And that such recklessness cost an innocent man, Mr. Akai Gurley, his life. Your reaction?
Well, first off, we should remember that this was a terrible tragedy and an accident. It's a terrible tragedy for everyone involved. Obviously, that man's family, who was, just going about his business, and this visited his doorstep. But it's also a tragedy for Officer Liang, who was starting off his career as a police officer, have no intention of going out that day and getting in an incident or injuring anyone or, God forbid, killing something. So accidents unfortunately happen even when they're tragedy, and they also happen to New York City police officers. The environment in which they work, as you stated, a very dimly lit stairwell. And unfortunately, there's never a perfect script, and everything doesn't go exactly right when you're out there on patrol. Unfortunately, in this case, there's a man's death here. But many of the facts that were talked about in the newspaper, quite frankly, may not be facts. Officer Liang is going to get the opportunity now in court to tell his story for the first time. So I think we should withhold judgment until after we get those facts before the judge and the jury in Brooklyn, and then come to a conclusion.
But, Mr. President, the chilling 911 call.
The ambulance is on their way. She said put pressure on it, hard pressure on his chest to not move him.
Ma'am, you said the cops are there? He's not breathing.
He's not breathing.
All right, his girlfriend, is she willing to do CPR? Is she
You know how to do CPR, Mama?
Tell her to breathe in his mouth. Let me ask you something. Are the cops assisting her?
They're right here. They're not with her. They're trying to, I guess, call backup. I don't know.
All right. Does she have anybody else with her?
No, she's alone with him. There's like a million cops, but no ambulance. I don't know what is going on. I know I was telling her to do the CPR, and she's trying to do it. I don't know.
He had just apparently shot an innocent man, and neither officer touched the man, aided this dying man. According to the prosecutor, Officer Liang stood there whining and moaning about how he could get fired. Both officers had been on the job for less than a year. Is it a bad mistake to have two officers together with as little experience as that?
First off, the department is really trying to make it where you have more senior folks, police officers, teach younger folks, but it's a young job at this juncture, and that's why we're always talking about the staffing issue within the NYPD. But what also gets lost from the narrative that the prosecution tells is the narrative that it affects a police officer too. When you're involved in a shooting, especially when it's an accident, it's traumatic to that police officer too. Many times they go into shock over it as well, and they may not act at that juncture like they would when everything is calm, because they realize there may have been a mistake, there may be a person that's injured, or God forbid in this case, that was dead as well. That's not easy on a police officer. Many times that gets lost in the narrative that folks tell. It's not easy on the police officer. Terrible tragedy to that family, and I'm not trying to lessen the loss for that family, but it's also a terrible tragedy for the police officer that now has to live with this and talk about this in a courtroom.
The effectiveness of your law enforcement boycott. Director Quentin Tarantino, his movies, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, As you know, he appeared at a alleged police brutality rally and used the term murderers, referring to police officers. Was that campaign effective?
It was absolutely effective. It was a campaign that started here in New York City after he said those insulting words about New York City police officers who go out in the street every day and do a difficult job and do it well. Murderers? Absolutely not. It definitely had effect because it didn't only stay here in New York City. It spread across the entire country to men and women that wear the uniform of different departments across this country from coast to coast that said, you know what, I'm insulted too. So they won't see a movie that's directed by someone that thinks I'm a murderer for the job that I do. But it spread beyond that. It spread to our family members as well, our neighbors, our friends, and those folks that we protect in the neighborhoods. I cannot tell you the number of emails I've gotten from regular working folks that said, we appreciate what New York City police officers do. How dare this person who's just trying to make money, who deals in fiction, who just has to put it on the screen and not care the results of it, attack New York City police officers and law enforcement across this country. So it had a huge effect. You've seen how it's tanked. Look, he's been around a long time. His movies have done well. This time, not so much at the box office, because we have an economic effect when we all stand together as police officers, and more importantly than that, when we stand together as folks and family members that support what New York City police officers and law enforcement across this country does. We have an economic effect. There's an awful lot of us. We're right-thinking, good and just folks. And when we speak as one voice.
Are you still boycotting him? What about his right to a First Amendment?
Look, he has that right, and we will protect that right. We always have and always will. We protect every day folks we don't agree with. That's our job to do it. We do it proudly and we do it well. But he had an opportunity to say, look, I misspoke. I got caught up in the crowd. I went with the crowd. He doubled down at that juncture, and then he continued to try to defend his terrible, egregious words. But we also have his family members, who is part of the law enforcement family as well, that say, that's not what we think. We wore that uniform, and we think he's wrong. So you have the police family, you have his own family, and you have the family of this city saying, you're wrong, you made a mistake, you should say so. But instead, he doubled down and just continued moving forward.
And coming up next, we'll take a look at some local headlines. So stay with us.